We're gonna go deep into how bodybuilding can help sprint-based performance, and we're gonna start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming a better athlete, you want to learn how you can be more explosive, you want to learn how you can run faster and be more athletic, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a freak. So oftentimes the training around sprinting is going to involve a lot of rapid movements, a lot of fast rates of coordination. And so when we start to think about how can bodybuilding actually improve sprinting, it starts to become a little bit confusing. It's not going to be moving fast. We're going to get big and bulky. We're not actually going to be able to run fast. Jay Cutler couldn't be a sprinter. Kai Green couldn't be a world-class sprinter. But we've got to take that step back. We got to see what are the key elements behind sprinting. We know that you've got to have a really, really explosive start. We know that you have to have a really good drive phase. We know that you have to have really good mechanics at that top end speed. And then we know you also have to slow down the slowest if you want to be a world-class sprinter, if you want to be the best sprinter that you can possibly be. So where does bodybuilding come into play? We've got to think about first, what is bodybuilding? Bodybuilding is simply the method that we can utilize to increase muscle mass or muscle strength. So if we can talk about this from a perspective of we're going to try to lengthen the muscle. If we can lengthen the muscle, that's going to increase the muscle size from a theoretical perspective. If we can thicken the muscle and make the muscle belly a little bit deeper, that's going to increase the muscle size, which could potentially improve the power output behind those specific muscles. And so where does bodybuilding for sprinting come into play? So if we can break down sprinting into these three categories, we can start to look at the different modalities that we're going to use to improve our sprint-based performance. And so right off the bat, we know that you have to do explosive work, right? We have to be extremely explosive. We've got to be explosive out of the blocks. We've got to be explosive when we're actually running. There's a lot involved in running that is all about speed, right? The whole point of sprinting is to get from point A to point B faster than all of our opponents. And so that's a key factor, is we've got to be explosive. And some of the things that might happen here, we might do some technical lifts like the Olympic lifts. We might do some absolute strength. So we might do some things like back squats or single leg squats, any type of squat variation. And the reason why we'll do that is that the squats will sort of provide a support for that explosive work. We can also factor in here, we might lump in some plyometric work here. So some plyometric work with some Olympic lifts with some squats, that's going to be lumped into that explosive work. And these squats will also be lumped down here, but this is all going to be part of the supporting system. Then we can get into the reflexive work. When we're talking about reflexive work for sprinting, we've got to think about the stumble reflex. So think about I'm walking down the street and all of a sudden I hit my back foot on something behind me and I can't get that front foot forward. The stumble reflex is going to get that front foot to move forward faster. Okay, so the stumble reflex is a key component behind sprint performance, as is the cross extensor reflex. Okay, cross extensor reflex is that when my left leg is grounded, when my front leg is in the air, this is going to be very rigid. It's going to help. This is a reflex that is going to be utilized, and if it's trained properly, can really help us at that top end speed to be rigid all throughout that hip, all throughout that grounded position. So we're going to think about the stumble reflex. We're going to think about the cross extensor reflex. We're going to think about achieving the hip locks. So when we're talking about the hip lock, we're going to be doing various movements, various rapid movements that will then lead to an isometric contraction throughout our hip. And that's going to lead to a hip co-contraction. That's really, really important when we're running at top speed. We've got to be able to co-contract in our hips so with our mechanics are very, very effective. So we know reflexive work is important. We know explosive work is really important. And then this is sort of going to provide the support behind those two is going to be absolute strength. So again, we've got the squats. We have things along that nature. And one of those key aspects that's going to come underneath this absolute strength is where we're going to see bodybuilding come into play. I like to look at bodybuilding as a way to lengthen and provide structural support and structural integrity for the posterior chain, for the key muscles that are going to be involved in sprint-based mechanics. So even our quads, our glutes, especially when we're coming out of the blocks through the drive phase. So a couple key factors that we can think about is if we can utilize loads like a stiff-legged deadlift and we can try to really, really lengthen that hamstring and lengthen the glutes and try to feel that position, and as we pull out of the bottom position from that super lengthened position of the hamstring, now we can start to utilize higher reps, 7, 9, 15 reps of stiff-legged deadlifts. Same thing if we're talking about lunges. If we want to focus on, achieving a hip lock with a walking lunge, now we have a plate overhead, we're going to do a walking lunge, and then as we're lunging, we want to try and hold this hip lock position forward, drop into that bottom position while we're holding that plate overhead, and we might do that for 4 or 5 sets of 9 to 12 reps. That's going to be considered some serious bodybuilding style of training, but that can provide a very good support behind the explosive work. If we just do explosive work, if we just do reflexive work, we're not necessarily going to improve the functionality of our muscles and how our muscles can coordinate and how much power they can put out. We will to a point, but that's where another key aspect comes into play. One big factor that I really have found to be super successful with bodybuilding work is, one, we can improve dynamic trunk control. When we're talking about speed, when we're talking about sprinting, dynamic trunk control, which can be lumped into the reflexive work, it can be lumped into absolute strength, it can be lumped into bodybuilding and explosive work. It is paramount that we're not losing energy side to side, that we're not too hunched when we're at top end speed. And that dynamic trunk control comes into play when we're doing that long duration work that would be considered bodybuilding. Same thing if we're doing ab-based training. If we're doing 4 sets of 25 of hollow body rocks with kettlebells banded to the barbell, that's gonna be bodybuilding style repetitions with movements that are gonna help with reflexive work, that are gonna help with that dynamic trunk control. If I can control my trunk more effectively, I'm going to waste less energy. If I waste less energy, I'm going to slow down slower. Slowing down slower means I can hold that top end speed longer, and that comes back to utilizing those bodybuilding principles of long duration sets. Now, one other key factor behind utilizing bodybuilding is that now, not only are we going to use it to improve our dynamic trunk control, we're also going to utilize it to train different aspects of controlling the hip lock, of doing long duration sets for lunges to increase the power and increase the muscle mass of our glutes, to increase the muscle mass of our quads, to increase the muscle mass of our hamstrings. Now, there comes a point of diminishing returns. We don't want to get too big as far as our actual sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is concerned. We want most of our bodybuilding to get to a point where we're only utilizing it to stimulate more myofibrillar hypertrophy and the proliferation of satellite cells. So this is where we're gonna get in depth. One of the key factors that I like when we're doing bodybuilding work, we could be doing a single leg squat, we could be doing single leg chaos RDLs, we could be doing Nordic hamstrings, which is a phenomenal bodybuilding movement that I love to utilize with all the sprint-based training that we do. We'll do 5 to 7 sets of 5 to 10 reps of Nordic hamstring curls. But one thing that we'll do is if we're doing the Nordic hamstring curls or if we're doing stiff-legged deadlifts, we're really targeting the hamstrings. We're targeting the posterior chain. Now, when we're sprinting with the explosive work, when we're doing reflexive work, typically the hamstrings at top end speed are going to be held in an isometric position. And this is information from Franz Bosch. This is where the hamstrings actually utilize quite a bit of the isometric holding as you're sprinting. And so one really cool thing that you can do is you can stimulate your fatigue in the hamstrings and in the posterior chain through Nordic hamstring curls, through sliding curls, through stiff-legged deadlifts, all these things. Then you rest for 30 to 60 seconds. Now, here's a kicker. You can go onto a glute ham, and we get onto that glute ham machine and we hold isometrically across. So our hamstrings are in an isometric position. Now here's a very unique method. You can put a barbell on your back and you can have someone just sort of push you up and down here, and that's going to stimulate more perturbations. If we have perturbations, we can increase the speed of which our satellite cells get stimulated to come in and try and protect damaged sites. Okay, that's how satellite cells work. If you want more information on satellite cells, I have a whole podcast with Jane Anderson about this. You can put a bamboo bar on your back and you can put kettlebells on the end of that bamboo bar. But you have to hold isometrically across the entire glute ham, and you want to think about really firing those hamstrings. Now think about this. I just did stiff-legged deadlifts. I'm fatigued slightly. I rest 30 to 60 seconds. I get on the glute ham. Now my hamstrings are going to be holding an isometric position. I'm going to have those kettlebells bouncing. I'm going to have somebody, a partner or a coach, tap that bamboo bar. So now all of a sudden the kettlebells are bouncing all over the place. That is going to train dynamic trunk control. It's also going to train isometric position and isometric holding of the hamstrings, coordinating with our glutes, with our lower back. And that can also improve our capability with hip locks. So when we're doing bodybuilding for sprint-based training, we have to look at bodybuilding not as I'm gonna get big and bulky and run slow, but how can I utilize it to support explosive work? How can I utilize bodybuilding to support reflexive work? How can I support absolute strength? It's not just bodybuilding for sprinting, it's bodybuilding as a support system behind all these various modalities with the sole purpose of trying to run faster. That is what this is about. Too many people see training, especially sprint-based training, through this narrow hole right here, instead of seeing it as this all-encompassing way of pulling from various training methods, putting it into one periodized system to help you achieve your sprinting goal. So if you want help behind sprint-based training, you can click on the link down below, head over to garagestrength.com, and you can pick up a custom-based program, and I'll design a program specifically to help you become better in sprint-based performance. If you want more videos and content behind sprint-based training, click on this card right here. Until next time, guys, peace.